Hi, I'm Steve Collins from Tell Me Where to Go, and today we've got another podcast with pictures. I'll be speaking to Nils Persson from Visit Sweden about that wonderful Scandinavian country. I'm sure you'll find a lot of valuable information if you're planning a trip there. Keep viewing. Speak to you later. Now we are travelling to the biggest country in Scandinavia, and it's an extraordinarily beautiful place. We're going to Sweden, and I'm speaking to Nils Persson, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Visit Sweden. Nils, what a beautiful country you live in. I know that you've got hundreds and hundreds of islands there, and there's many, many lakes as well. It must be so great to be surrounded by so much water.
Yes, absolutely. That's correct. So I would say that's a big part of our way of living. It's close to water, no matter where you are. If you're up in the north of Sweden or if you're in the south of Sweden, we have a quite long coastline as well, from West Sweden to the south. And then,
well, it actually goes all the way up to Norway as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the Finnish border as well. So,
yes.
Yeah, and a lot of lakes and rivers as well. I would say you're always close to water, no matter where you are in Sweden. And there's also a lot of nature and forest around. So it's really beautiful. And
Stockholm itself, where you're based, that is built on, I think it's about 14 islands or so, but it must be extraordinary just to negotiate all the islands. And does that mean that Stockholm is pretty flat because it is an island city?
Yeah, it's fairly flat, I would say, but it's also a bit hilly, not hilly, but it's a bit not entirely flat. And I think that's the island that sort of goes above the water, so to speak. So travel between the islands.
Yes, and because Stockholm is comprised of so many islands, do you have different sections of the city that are a little bit more sort of rural looking and others that are definitely part of the CBD, or does it all sort of meld into one?
I would say it pretty much melt into one, but no matter where you are in Sweden, if you're in the urban areas, the three big ones at Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö, you're always close to nature and more rural areas as well. So it's not far off to get into untouched nature, but then also just a leap away you have a Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, is one of the beauties of Sweden. You have the nature, even though you're in the urban areas, you have the nature just sort of more or less around the corner. But then you also have the more urban scenery with bars and restaurants and museums and everything.
Is that reflected in Swedish architecture? Because I know that the Swedish architecture, you're renowned for that sort of clean, uncluttered look, and there seems to be a lot of wood used and stuff. Is that because of the area you live in? You've got lots of forests and stuff, and so you would use those natural materials as such?
That sort of the materials that we have had over the years to build with. So I think that's a big part of why we use them. We have quite a lot of woods and other sort of natural materials in Sweden. And one of the things that a lot of Swedes have their sort of holiday cottage, and they are red painted cottage in a color called Farlig Röd Färg, which is a red color from the copper mine in Dalarna. So that's a big part, especially on the more rural areas of Sweden. You can see those red cottages with white corners, which is a big part of, I would say, of the Swedish landscape as well.
I know it's a very contemporary country. You're one of the world leaders, for instance, in social issues and your health and your education system, etc. But I guess there must be a lot of tradition there as well, because the Swedes go back a very long way, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of traditions that we have, even though they come from the various sort of our history from the Viking Age, some of them, and others from Christianity. I wouldn't say they are sort of religious holidays in that sense, but they are a big part of our traditions. We have the Midsummer's Eve, of course.
Yes.
We have something that we call Lucia, which is the Saint Santa Lucia, that celebrating sort of, I think it's her birthday or something like that, on the 13th of December, which is a big thing where we eat gingerbread cookies and lussekatter, which is a saffron bun that we eat, for example. And then we have crayfish parties, which is also tradition around. So there's a lot of traditions that we celebrate. And also all the fika sessions where we drink coffee and eat cookies and cinnamon buns, which is very Swedish as well. So it's a lot of traditions, absolutely.
I know that Sweden extends north into Lapland as well. There'd be a lot of traditions up there amidst the Laplanders too, I guess.
Absolutely. From the Sami people, we have a lot of traditions as well. how they work with reindeers and stuff like that. So absolutely. So there's a lot of traditions.
One of the things I've got to talk about, because I'm sure it's one of the most famous things to come out of Sweden, ABBA. There is an ABBA museum in Stockholm now. ABBA had an absolutely incredible influence on world music. Are you proud of ABBA as a country? Are you proud of their achievements?
Absolutely. And I think that ABBA is one of it's something that you have in every person in Sweden since sort of childhood. There's part of what we do and who we are that we might not think about it in that sense, maybe. But absolutely, they're hugely influential to a lot of Swedes. And also we are quite big in music export, and I think one part of what started that was ABBA, absolutely.
Now the ABBA Museum, of course, that would be these days, because it's not all that old, I don't think, but that would be something that most tourists would want to go and see, I guess, because it really is full of their costumes and their lifestyles, etc. It must be a fantastic place to go and visit, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's quite close to the city centre, but on one of the islands, the Royal Djurgården, which is basically a quite large island close to the city and sort of bordering archipelago as well, where you have a lot of museums like the ABBA Museum, but then you have the Natural History Museum, you have the great outdoor museum of Skansen, for example, with a lot of history from Sweden and a lot of animals as well.
Does that hark back to sort of medieval times, the outdoor museum, does it? Does that show you what life used to be like a few centuries ago?
Yes, absolutely. And you can sort of be part of workshops and other stuff like that when you visit the museum to see how did they make the clothes and how were they making the food back in the days. And also you can see the Swedish, the Nordic or Scandinavian animals like the bears and wolves and reindeers and mooses. And
getting around Sweden as well, I know you have an excellent railway system, and I know that you have some of the most beautiful railway journeys, but you also have a big ferry network as well. Would you recommend that people that go to Sweden, they use public transport to get around rather than self-drive? Because I find that if you use public transport, you actually have time to look at where you're going and admire the landscape that you're going through.
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend that. And we have a really good system of rail system that covers the entire Sweden. We have along the coastline, for example, we have the sort of the main tracks, but then also inland up in the north, we have a small track train rails as well, where you can see and you can sort of hop on and hop off quite easy as well. So I think that really is, then you can always hire a car somewhere if you want to go out and sort of explore more on yourself. But I would say sort of public buses and trains, you can get around quite a lot, and you can also use the ferries as well.
What about accommodation? Because you would have a variety of accommodation there. You have everything from, I guess, 5-star to backpackers, I guess. But it's pretty easy. Most of the major tourist places would have a variety of accommodation for people, I guess, would they?
Yeah, as you say, we have everything from 5-star to more sort of lower-end accommodation styles. And they're also popping up more and more of more sort of unique living experience as well. There's been a lot of glamping where you have these sort of canvas tents, but with a high-end interior in them. That's really nice. But then you also have, for example, up in Jukkasjärvi, you have the Ice Hotel, for example.
Yes.
That's a hotel entirely built of ice. And then you have the Tree Hotel where you live in trees. So you have a big variety of great accommodation down to the sort of the more normal classic hotel and boutique hotels as well.
I know that people who are interested in winter sports, there's plenty to do in Sweden as far as skiing and skating and all sorts of things. What about in the warmer months? Because I know that hiking and things like that are very popular in Sweden. You have a lot of trails, I guess, that people can follow?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have them across the entire country, actually, even though I would say that maybe a bit more sort of north of Stockholm and around the mountain chain in the north of Sweden, you have much more sort of tracks and trails, but you have them everywhere. We're starting to get more and more popular, even though we hike quite a lot, I would say, as a country, but sort of have exploded. We also have this network of small cabins as well where you can stay, so you don't need to bring your tent either. So we have them, so there's a network of them called the STF.
And do you book them prior to arriving, or do you have to have a reservation?
Yeah, a huge variety. Sometimes it's just sort of a house with bunk beds and you can just walk in there and live for free, and you can't book them in advance. The first one that gets there can sort of take the bed. On some of them they also have from hostels to hotels as well, at the same place. But also I would say when it comes to the nature, I think we have 4 quite distinct seasons in Sweden, with the spring, the autumn and the summer and the winter. We use our nature in, I would say, different ways. In the summer times it's hiking and it's, of course, sort of swimming and having fun in the water and fishing and stuff like that. And then now during the autumn it's a lot of mushroom picking berries as well, because we have the freedom to roam. You can always go out and put up your tent wherever you want, more or less. Free for everyone to do that.
Because you have so much water around you, both in the Baltic Sea and you've got so many lakes, water normally warms things up a bit. So does that mean that the climate in many parts of Sweden is perhaps a little better than in other parts of Scandinavia?
I would say it's maybe better, but I think it's quite the same. I think Norway might take a lot of the rain because we have the sort of the mountain change that sort of stops that, and they're closer to the big ocean outside. So I think we have a much better climate, and even up really high up in the north in the summers it can be really warm from our sort of point of view, which is 25 degrees plus, sort of sand beaches as well, and the warm gets warm to swim in. Swedish
food is absolutely delicious. Your meatballs are quite famous, but also you have a way of preparing fish which is absolutely delicious.
So we eat quite a lot of fish, I would say, and we prepared salmon in a way to keep it fresh without cooking it. So it's really, really nice. And then we also do a variety of smoking the fish, especially salmon as well. On the west coast, we have a lot of oysters, wild oysters that are really great, and lobsters. Yeah. So it's a big thing in Sweden, and actually the lobster fishing just started a couple of weeks ago, for example.
Yeah,
crayfish is also that we fish and then we boil them in broth of water and beer and dill and other spices.
So for people that are wanting to go to Sweden, are there any places that you would particularly recommend they should see?
I would recommend to do a round trip because we have quite a big variety of things, and depending also on what you're into. I think traveling by train between the 3 main urban areas doesn't take longer than like 4 hours on the sort of higher speed trains. So it's quite easy to go between Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö. But then also I think you should go out more on the rural areas and also up in the north, because there's a lot of sea and take advantage of going into the nature and going on the hiking trails. And I think that's something that's unique with Sweden, with all the contrast from very modern and urban areas, and then you also have the rural areas, which is fantastic sceneries and a lot of easy access nature to discover.
The best way to get to Sweden, if you're coming from Denmark, there's a bridge across from Copenhagen to Malmö, isn't there? Or you can fly in, of course, or you can get ferries in from other places too, can you?
We have regular ferry traffic from Denmark, but Germany, Poland and Finland as well. So you have quite a big ferry network, and also from Norway, but mainly from Germany and Poland and from Finland. So it's quite easy to get there.
Excellent. Well, I've been speaking to Nils Persson, who is a Chief Marketing Officer for Visit Sweden. Lovely to get to know Sweden, Nils. Thank you very much for chatting to us. Well, didn't Nils make Sweden sound like a fascinating place? Thank you for watching Tell Me Where to Go. If you enjoy our videos, please press our like button and also subscribe to our channel. This is Steve Collins from Tell Me Where to Go. See you next time.